Hi, it's Jen from Shabby Fabrics. I have a project for you today I think you're going to love to make. It's not only fun to make, but it's practical. Who doesn't need another bag for the gym, for the beach, a day out, maybe a picnic? I had so much fun putting that together using the Ombre Confetti Metallic Jelly Roll from Moda Fabrics. Normally I'm using jelly rolls to make quilts, and I thought, well, maybe that'd be fun to do a tote bag, a nice big tote bag, and I can't wait to show you how easy it is. All you'll need will be a jelly roll, and what's really cool about this, we only used half the jelly roll, 20 strips to make the bag. That includes the outside and the lining. So you can actually make 2 bags out of 1 jelly roll. Now for each bag, you'll need 3/8 of a yard of a fabric for the straps. And I loved the metallic, the gold metallic circles in this collection, so I picked a metallic gold fabric for the handles, and you'll also need some fusible fleece. Now our measurements and all of that will be available as a download. If you haven't already subscribed to our YouTube channel, I encourage you to do that because we're always coming up with new ideas and even new stitchery clubs and things like that, so go ahead and subscribe so you'll be the first to know. You'll be looking for the download for this project, and that'll be in the link below. So don't worry about writing any of this information down, but I love knowing that I can get 2 bags out of that. You'll just need to double your yardage for your handle and for your fusible fleece. So let's just jump into how easy this is. With the Ombre Confetti Metallic Jelly Roll, you actually got 2 of each strip. So I simply separated my jelly roll into 2 separate groups and put the second aside. I'm going to make 1 bag for myself, as you saw, and the other to give as a gift, which is great. I love that there's 1 for me, 1 to give. I think that's a great value considering that you can get 2 bags out of 1 jelly roll. So let's put that aside for now. As you can see, once you just lay out the arrangement of where you want the strips, you'll sew them together with a standard 1/4" seam allowance, and I press the seams open. We'll be putting a fusible fleece on the back of that, so I'll go ahead and put these aside for now. And I pieced my unit together, and I want to show you just how beautiful it is. It's so pretty to just look at this. I'll put that aside. Now, one thing that I noticed when I was laying out my strips is the strips, and I think it's really true of all fabric, there's kind of a wider white selvage, and on the other end, there's no white at all. Because I wanted to be able to maximize the size of my bag, I wanted to have something lining up on my left side, and so I just chose the wider white selvage to be all on the same side. So as you can see, we just sew them together and press the seams open. Once you have that put together, you've done all that, obviously you've pressed all your strips out, you're just going to iron the fusible fleece on the back side of that. And I'll bring that out right now. Whenever you're using any kind of fusible product on the back side of a large piece of fabric, I recommend that you go ahead and start pressing that on from the center out. It just helps to eliminate bubbles, and they kind of just go out versus you starting on one side and ironing, and that kind of tends to creep and push along any bubbles. So that's just one thing I've learned along the way. Now, because you do have a big piece of fusible fleece on the back of your strip set, we wanted to go ahead and secure those strips to the fusible fleece. So notice the beautiful metallic thread, and I can't wait to show you all about using metallic thread, which is very exciting and very new to me, by the way. I had nothing but problems with metallic thread before breaking. You might have had that experience too. This is why we are now using the Thread Director. We have it available as the single spool Thread Director and the Thread Director 2. We'll be doing some twin needle sewing. Again, that's really new to me. I'm a quilter. This is all new to me, and it's really exciting and is doable on any sewing machine. So don't think you have to have a wonderful BERNINA. I love our BERNINA, absolutely love that. But if you have a different sewing machine, this will work with your machine too. So I left one of the lanes unstitched. We'll stitch that together. But as you can see, Stitching these together with a twin needle basically means I get to sew on either side of that seam all at the same time. It saves me time, and those two lanes of stitching are perfectly parallel with each other. So that's a great thing to have a twin needle. We certainly have those available as well if you don't have a twin needle for your sewing machine. Now, let me talk to you just a little bit about a metallic thread. This metallic thread, as you can see here, is wound on this direction. If you put that on a horizontal spool pin, it makes the thread come off rotating and is more likely to break. So the thread director was created. It's a fantastic invention, and when you have two spools, the thread director 2 is perfect. And when you thread your machine, you grab a hold of both threads and thread the machine as if it were one. And when you get down to your needle, simply insert one of the threads into one side of the needle and the other thread into the other side of the needle. You might want to reduce your tension on this particular BERNINA 770 Quilters Edition. I did dial down my tension to 2.5, and I increased my stitch length to 3/0. Just experiment with your own machine and find the settings that work best for you, practicing on some scrap fabric before you start working on your jelly roll bag. So let's go to the sewing machine, and I'm just going to show you how beautifully the machine sews using the twin needle. And by the way, that's a Schmetz metallic needle. I think it's really important that you are getting a twin needle that's built for metallic thread. There's a smoother groove in the actual eye of the needle, so when the metallic thread goes in, it's less likely to have friction and breakage. So we're going to go ahead and go to the machine. We'll stitch down that final lane that does not have any beautiful metallic thread. So let's head over right now and we'll get that done. Okay, so we've sewn together actually it's already been sewn together, but we just basically kind of top stitched that. You might have noticed I was sewing slower than normal. I do recommend you dial down the speed on your machine, because if you sew too fast, you're more likely to break that beautiful sulky metallic thread. Now, as you can see, I've got fusible fleece hanging out here. I need to trim that away on all 4 sides of our strip set. And of course, I'm going to be trying to trim away as minimal as possible, because I want to be able to make the bag as big as I want it to be. So off camera, I'll go ahead and bring my rotary cutter and my ruler, and I'm just going to be laying that down, trying to trim away as little as possible. When I come back, we'll take you to the next step of making our beautiful tote bag. I have everything trimmed up and ready to go. We will now bring right sides together. We're going to make a big tube. So we'll bring our ends together like this. And I'm just going to pin the beginning and the end in a couple places along the way, just so that doesn't creep and shift on me. One of the things I've enjoyed when I was figuring out a fun bag pattern is I'm used to a bag having an exterior and then a separate lining. This is everything all in one. So I think if you're a beginner, this is a perfect first bag for you. It's an impressive looking bag, and it's very easy to make, and it's not the complication of a separate lining and how does that work. You're not using a zipper. It's very straightforward. Now, you may have already noticed that I took the thread director off the machine, because for this purpose, I want a single needle and standard thread, and I'm just going to be, again, sewing a 1/4 inch seam allowance and then pressing that seam open. If you have a second sewing machine at home, you might want to have one have the thread director on it with the metallic needles, the twin metallic needle, the metallic thread, and then a second machine with just your standard 50 weight cotton in both the top and the bobbin, and your single needle with a standard straight stitch. So otherwise you will be switching back and forth a couple times, But let's jump over to the sewing machine. I'm just going to sew a standard 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way down. Okay, so we are now ready to press that seam open like the others. So we'll go ahead and go do that right now. Let me bring that over. I love my Panasonic iron. I love that it's cordless. When you're dealing with a big project, I think this is a bigger project, sometimes that cord is just, it's just another thing for me to deal with. So I appreciate so much the fact that that iron is cordless. Now, to get that open, just kind of create kind of a tube, and you can even, this has a great steaming feature about it. We just kind of want to open up that seam. There we go. Now it's starting to let go. Now I'm going to press that seam. Okay, now we get to turn our tube right side out to the pretty side. I just love the idea of using jelly rolls in a new way. They're not always going to be for quilts, and they can do other functional things. Now, just like we have the beautiful gold metallic thread accenting each of those seams, the seam we just sewed needs our gold metallic thread as well. So we will be needing our thread director again, our twin needle, our 2 spools of our silky beautiful metallic thread to just sew down that seam. And because it's now a tube, there's some tricks to that, and I want to show you that it's very easy to accomplish, and I'm going to show you that right now. So I have a nice big table here. This is when you want to put your tube around here, but as you can see, this is a really big table, and even on my other sewing machines, it's big, it's too big. And this is when you'd want to go ahead and remove it, and that's why they make them removable. So in this instance, I'm going to go ahead and remove that, and then we will be able to maneuver around this much easier. So I'm just going to be sewing slowly like I did before. Just a reminder, if you're using now a single machine, adjust your settings back to reduce your tension. Again, on the BERNINA, it's the 2.5. My stitch length on this machine is 3/0. So if you are flip-flopping with the same machine, just adjust back. You might want to write those settings down. Now our goal here is to make sure that we're sewing this seam open and not inadvertently sewing our bag together. That means you just kind of have to work it around this kind of arm, feeling underneath and kind of making sure that this part of the bag is coming underneath and this part staying on top. You just kind of have to work your way through and do it slowly. All right, so I'm going to be taking my time to make sure I get this right. Here we go. We have all of our strips sewn together. Every seam has the beautiful metallic thread. Now we'll turn it wrong side out, and we'll be working with the ends now. Like I mentioned before, this is both the outside and the inside of the bag. There's nothing else besides this, except for those handles, of course. There's something there. With the bottom here, we're just going to sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance, or maybe just a little bit greater. You want to make sure that is absolutely secure. On the other end, we'll be leaving an opening so that we can turn the bag through. I like to leave opening. This is a lot of bulk turning through. I'm going to be leaving open, we could say it maybe a 6-inch opening. I'm just going to mark that here. So nothing unique other than I do recommend wherever you stop, you reinforce and you backstitch here, and where you begin, before you go sewing this, make sure you reinforce, because as we turn the bag through, that's going to be a stress point. I'm going to go ahead and do that off camera. There's nothing really unique about that. Again, just a 1/4 inch or slightly greater all the way across here and up to here and here, here and here, and we'll leave that open. I will be changing to the single needle and the 50 weight cotton thread, and when I come back, we'll take you to the next step. Now that I have the bottom completely closed and the other portion, again, we left our opening to turn through, we're going to do something called box the corners. Depending on how wide you want that bag side to be, will depend on what size you box your corners. This may be new to you. If it's not new to you, you know exactly what I'm about to do, because it's really the same for all bags. A lot of bags are assembled this way in this portion. So we have that seam where we sewed it together, and then we have this here. Now, we're just going to lay that on top of our table, and we're just going to flatten that out. And depending on, if we box our corner here, you can imagine that side of that bag's going to be that wide. If we want a narrower, not so wide bag, then we're going to do less of a box. Let's go ahead and I like a nice big bag. I want my towels to fit in there, everything from the gym. I'm at the gym all the time. Let's go ahead and let's say we're going to box that to 6 inches. So I've got my ruler here, and I'm lining up. Notice I'm on my mat. I've got guidance here on my mat. If I'm going to do a 6-inch box, for example, my 3 is going to be right along my seam line, with 3 on the left and 3 on the right, and I'm going to draw a line. Let me draw that over there a little bit better. I don't want that going anywhere. Pin that. I don't want anything to shift while we're sewing that down. And I like to, as I come to this bulkier seam, I'm going to lay that open. And so we're just going to be careful about when we come here. We don't want to let that seam roll over. It's too much bulk. So let's go to the sewing machine, and we're going to sew with a straight stitch on regular tension, regular stitch length, a straight stitch right along this line. Okay, so I'm just going to flatten this out at my machine, and I just do one more check that seam feels over top of the bottom there, and it feels right to me. I'm just going to reinforce that. We'll just remove our pins, and we're going to cut our seam, not our seam, 1/4 inch away from our seam with our ruler and a nice good sharp rotary cutter. And that's your first corner. We repeat those steps for the other 3 corners. I'll do that off camera, and when I come back, I'm gonna have the bag actually turned through, and we're gonna take you to the very next step. So we have turned the bag through, I've turned it through, and you know what? It's a little bit of a struggle. It's a lot of bulk turning through. It can get your fabric wrinkly. Don't worry, this is all part of the process. If you want to have your points just perfect in those corners, we have the point-to-point turner. That is wonderful to get in there. Make sure you don't poke through. And that's just to kind of get those little extra points out there in your bag. And of course, you might want to give your bag a press at this point. And now I have this opening. What are we going to do with this opening? This is going to be what's in the lining of the bag. You could got a couple options here. Simply turn that under. It is bulky, so I shouldn't say simply. You just kind of work it through as best you can. Having just a little bit of a press does reduce the I would say kind of the challenge of getting that seam closed. And of course the same on the other side, just a quick press. Now I'm just going to work this through. You've got a couple options. You could do this by hand. I know that my gym bag gets used hard, and I'll be putting it in the washing machine over and over again. So I am going to opt for a machine stitch here. I'm just going to put a pin in, and I'm just going to show you how you kind of feather in, starting where the opening is down here. We're going to go to the sewing machine, and I'll show you how to feather something in and feather out. Pin that one more time right there. I don't want that going anywhere. So let's go to the sewing machine, and I'll show you how to do this. So we see this is where our stitching is. I'm going to actually start a little bit here before it, kind of coming in shallow at an angle, pick it up, run parallel to where I know I need to stitch to, and feather away. So let's do that now. Let's back stitch that. I'm going to continually check that I'm catching that rolled edge right there. We want to feather out right there. Roll the bag. There we go. As I mentioned, this is the lining of the bag. So you'll just feel the separation, and you're just going to push this in. This is a nice sturdy bag. There's a lot of layers here. This bag is going to wear really well for you. And I can feel these corners here, and I'm just trying to match up my hands kind of splayed out like this inside those corners. And I'm just trying to match corner to corner down here, and again over here. You can look and check it. There we are. Now I've got this rolled. Obviously you saw how that just rolled inside. I want to secure that. This is when we bring out our thread director 2, and I'm going to run a top stitch in the gold metallic, not just for beauty purposes, but actual now to just make sure that that lining stays inside. And otherwise, when I wash this bag could be coming out and be a big long tube. I don't want that to happen. So I'll do the twin needle sewing, and then we will move on to our straps and finish up our bag. I am going to go around this again, just like before, so we're not accidentally sewing this to this and closing our bag, and we'll just kind of rotate around the arm of the machine. Now I'm just going to be using having my presser foot right along that edge right there. You could go 1/4 inch away, do whatever you want to do. We just want to do a securing and decorative stitch. looking pretty. Now we need some handles. We need to be able to hold on to this bag. We chose, again, that beautiful metallic gold, but depending on what you're using for your project, it could be this very bag or something else. Just pick something that is pretty, and I'll show you how simple it is to make these straps. Let me just trim off a little bit here. You'll need 3/8 of a yard, and you'll be cutting 2 strips 6 inches by the width of the fabric. So let's get that out right now, and I can show you how easy that is to prepare these handles. You have your 6-inch piece, and you'll simply fold that in half all the way down and press. I'll just show you for a small portion how we do it. Then you'll open that up. You have a nice strong visual seam, and you'll fold toward the center and press again. And do the same on this side, pressing to the middle again. Of course, you'll be doing that all the way down, and then just together and press. That's all there is to making that. We used a decorative gold, of course gold, our same gold, and we just did a slight 1/8 of an inch stitch on either side. I've done that ahead of time. I'll show you what that looks like. I have both of those here. And as I mentioned, just a pretty, and it's not just a decorative stitch, it's actually keeping that closed. And then we press down 1.5 inches. That's the portion on our bag where we're going to be having our securing stitch here. So go ahead and measure those down 1.5 inches and press, and you'll do that on both ends of each strap. Coming to the bag itself, if you kind of look at that, I can see I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now keep in mind that's going to change depending on the box corner you choose. I chose a big wide box corner because I want to have a lot of space for towels and things like that for the gym. Let's say that you chose maybe a 4-inch box corner. You're going to have a lot more visual striping in the front, so you can decide where you want your handles to sit on your bag. But in my instance, I kind of wanted those to be fairly wide. It looks like I've got one here, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So kind of a nice opening. I'm going to put those right here on just like this. And we measured down 3.5 inches. Again, you could do a different measure down if you prefer that strapping to go down a little bit further. We liked that measurement, and I'm just going to use my ruler here to mark that. I love my friction pen because I can take those lines away with heat, but I will be covering that with my strap, so I don't need to really be worrying about hiding those lines. So we'll position those down here, and let's pin those in place. And then I want to show you how to do that securing stitch that we did on our bag, because of course that is going to have a lot of strain on it as you carry your bag. That's where all of the basic strain of the bag will happen. And I'm going to actually mark on my bag just so that I don't overshoot it, where that 1.5 inch line is. I'll show you what I mean. We're going to stitch down. Let me secure that just a little bit better. There's a lot of bulk these pins are going through. We're going to stitch down. Hopefully the overhead camera can pick this up. We'll stitch down, come across, come up, over to my line here, across, back over. We've bent over this way, here, and then back up. So let's go to the sewing machine and we'll do that right now. If you're not comfortable doing that just visually, go ahead and draw that on there, and you're just going to we'll get a close-up shot of that so you can just draw that on if you're not comfortable visually sewing that. But we'll go ahead and we're going to do that right now. I will actually need to change this out to a single needle at this point, And what I will simply do is unthread one of these, and I can use my thread director 2 as a single thread director, and I will simply be using one of the spools of the thread and a single needle at that point. So I've got my bag. Again, the underside is under this arm, so I make sure that I don't inadvertently sew this front to the back. Make sure your strap is lined up, because just that maneuvering could be twisting it. So we'll start here, and I definitely want to be reinforcing my stitching. I might even shorten my stitch length just a touch. So we're going to come all the way down here. Lift and pivot. And there's a lot of bulk here. It can be a little bit awkward. We'll just smooth it out as best you can, making sure you're not sewing on something you don't want to be sewing on, making sure your strap is still running parallel to your seam. Back up just a stitch. There, that's where I want to be. We're going to lift and pivot again. We're going to sew up to this line and then straight across. Okay, let's lift and pivot. I'm going to take this out. I don't need that anymore. That's my visual target right there. Let's lift and pivot. Now my gaze is right there in that corner. I'm not going to be looking here. I'm looking here. Where I look is where I will go. Okay, so we're going to lift, go back over. We've been here before. It's great to actually reinforce the bag down here, so that's okay that we're stitching there again. Let's pivot that around. Stitching here. And then up my final lane is here. This is the only area that doesn't have stitching. And we'll definitely reinforce once we get there. For the other strap, or for the same strap, I should say, when you bring it around, just make sure there's no twist. I've done that before. You can imagine, you don't want that twist over your shoulder. Make sure it's good and flat. Again, folding it under 1.5 inches. We measured down 3.5 pin. You're just going to repeat that. Do the same thing for the other side of the bag. And then you're going to have a gorgeous bag. And again, this makes, one Gelée roll makes 2 bags. I love that. one for me, one for a friend. So thank you for letting me show you how to make this practical and fun bag, and I can't wait to show you our next project. See you soon.